First, I'll be explaining the words. Respective means 각각의 각자의, peripheral means 주변적인, 지역적인, obligatory means 의무적인, plausible means 타당한 것 같은, 이치에 맞는, clauses mean 조항, preliminary means 예비에, orthographic means 철자가 바른, and morphology means 형태학, etymology means 어원학, uncontroversial means 논란의 여지가 없는, interrogative means 질문하는 물어보는, and referential means 참고해 참조해.
Today, I will talk about adjunct in English. Adjuncts are words or phrases that give extra information about how, when, where, or why something happens. Unlike subjects or objects, adjuncts are optional, which means the sentence can still make sense without them. For example, in the bus stopped suddenly, the word suddenly tells us how the bus stopped. In Shakespeare wrote his plays a year ago, the phrase "a year ago" tells us when. Other examples include they went to the theater in London, where, and he hates math because he can't understand it. Adjuncts have a few key features. First, they are optional. Second, they can appear together in a sentence, like last year I saw this film several times. Third, they can move to different positions, as in greedily, and Andy ate all the biscuits, or Andy ate all the biscuits greedily. But they cannot come between a verb and its direct object, as in Andy ate greedily all the biscuits, which is wrong. It is important to know that adjuncts are not the same as subjects or objects. To find an adjunct, ask how, when, where, or why the action happens. In short, adjuncts add extra detail and context to a sentence. They are optional, can move around, and help make sentences more complete and clear.
Now we are moving to the next chapter. We'll talk about form, words, word classes, and phrases. Let's start by thinking about the concept of a word. A word may look simple on the surface, but it's actually difficult to define. For example, look at this following three pairs. Most people would consider this to be different words. Dog is plural form of dog, created by adding s. However, at the same time, dog and dogs can also be regarded as the same lexeme because they share the same meaning range and differ only in numbers. Still, since their forms are different, they can be distinguished as separate word forms or in word forms. The same applies to eat and eats. And what about the duty-free? This expression is made of two words, duty and free, but since they are used together, for example in duty-free shop, they can feel like a single word. These issues belong to morphology, the field that studies the internal structure of words. Therefore, in this book, unless otherwise noted, the term word is used in the sense of a word form. For example, in the sentence, the president regularly eats big donuts in his limousine, we can say there are 9 words. However, linguists are more interested in how words differ grammatically than in simply counting how many there are. For example, the president is different from it, and it is different from big. To explain these differences, linguists classify words into word classes, also known as parts of speech. There are various ways to classify words. For instance, lexicographers, people who make dictionaries, arrange words alphabetically and record their pronunciation, meaning, and sometimes their etymology. Meanwhile, those who study historical language often divide words into open classes and closed classes. And in this book, following ancient grammatical tradition, words are divided into these 8 classes.
I'm going to talk about the problem with the notional definition of nouns and why we need a new approach. Traditionally, nouns are defined as words that denote people, animals, things, or places. But this definition doesn't cover all nouns. To solve this, linguists started using new criteria, formal or distributional, which I will explain in a moment. This traditional definition is called the notional definition. It defines nouns as words that denote people, animals, things, or places. For example, gym, giraffe, chair, and London. As you can see, it is based mainly on meaning, what a noun refers to. However, the notional definition has limits. Some nouns don't denote people, animals, or things. For example, love, dizziness, pain, sincerity. These words represent abstract ideas, emotion, or sensations, yet they are still nouns. So, as the key point here says, meaning alone can't define all nouns. If we try to expand the definition to include all these words, the definition becomes too broad and vague. Eventually, it ends up being just a long list of nouns, which doesn't really explain anything. As the visual shows, a simple list of nouns with a not equal sign cannot serve as a proper definition. Another issue with lists is circular reasoning. For example, why is a car a noun? Because it's on the list. Why is it on the list? Because it's a noun. This kind of reasoning goes in circles and doesn't actually explain anything. Lists alone have no explanatory value. A far better approach is to define nouns using formal and distributional criteria instead of meaning. Formal criteria focus on word forms. For example, actor is actors, man is mans. Distributional criteria look at where a word appears in a sentence and how it behaves in grammatical patterns. So the key idea is define nouns by form and function, not just meaning. To summarize, the notional definition is based on meaning, but it's too vague. Lists lead to circular reasoning and are unhelpful. A better approach is to use formal and distributional criteria. In conclusion, meaning tells us what nouns refers to, but form and function tells us what nouns really are.
Okay, now let's talk about suffixes. The item in 5 shows that different words can have similar meanings or suffixes as they are known as morphology. Suffixes and their positional counterpart prefixes belong to the class of affixes. Thus, return to 5, notice that all words in the first set of 3 words have the suffix -ens. The words of the second set all end in -hood, while those of the third, fourth, and fifth set end in -tion, -ness, and -ship, respectively. these are only 5 of quite a number of typical noun endings. The point here is that sometimes by looking at the morphological makeup of words, we can tell which word class they belong to. The word in 6 and 7 illustrate a similar point. In 6, we have plural endings, indicating that we have more than one item of a kind, whereas in 7, we have genitive endings, which usually, also not exclusively, indicate position. For example, the man's clothes, the pub's clientele, my sister's cat. Plural and genitive endings are also typical of nouns. It turns out, however, that morphological criteria are only of limited value. For example, many nouns do not end in any of the typical nominal suffixes such as -ens, -hood, -on, -ness. Some takes an irregular plural ending such as child is children and ox is oxen. If semantic, thus nominal and morphological criteria are inadequate, then it seems that what we have left are distributional criteria. As we will see, these are in fact the most reliable. Recall that when we talk about distributional criteria, we are referring to the way in which words, in this particular case nouns, behave syntactically in sentence, thus the pattern they typically occur in. For example, we might observe that all words we have labeled as noun can be preceded by words such as the, a, this, that, those, or whatever. These words belong to the class of determinative, which specify more precisely the meaning of the nouns they precise. In Table 3.1, below you will find a list of the most common determinative in English. We will see presently that when they occur independently, some of the words in Table 3.1 belongs to the class of pronouns. The member of that class, in this case nouns, typically occur in. As the user of the language, we know when a particular word is a noun simply a virtue of its occurring in a particular syntactic context.
Let's start with a simple example from the real world, a skyscraper. A skyscraper is only meaningful in relation to other, shorter buildings. It's tall and slender from matters, but without other buildings for comparison. The concept of a skyscraper will lose its meaning. This shows us that some concepts, even grammatical ones, exist relationally, not independently. Now, let's connect this idea to language. A noun is not defined by an inherent property, but by its function and position in a sentence. For example, in the sentence, the blank was well clamped by the police. Only a noun like car or motorcycle can fill the blank. Nouns have several subclasses. First, common nouns refer to everyday objects. They can be countable like book, cat, or train, or uncountable like butter, flour, or jam. Countable nouns can be pluralized, but uncountable nouns usually cannot. Second, proper nouns are names of specific people, places, or objects such as Jack, London, or Sarah. They usually do not take articles or plural endings and are considered referring expressions because they uniquely identify one entity. Finally, pronouns act as substitutes for nouns. For example, when Jim walked into the room and everybody stared at him, the pronoun him refers back to Jim. First, we have general personal pronouns such as I, me, you, he, him, she, her, it, we, us, they, them. These pronouns change their form depending on their grammatical position. For example, I is used as the subject while me is used as the object as in give it to us. Next, possessive personal pronouns show ownership like my, mine, you, yours, her, hers, his, our, ours, their, theirs. The first form, such as my or your, comes before a noun, for example, my house. The second form, such as mine or yours, is used alone, for example, possessive pronouns refer back to the subject of the sentence. Examples are myself, yourself, herself, himself, itself, ourselves, themselves. They are used when the subject and the object are the same person, for example, look after yourself. Reciprocal pronouns express mutual actions or feelings, such as each other and one another. For example, they love each other. Demonstrative pronouns are used to point to things, this, that, this, those.
So in this sentence, this pronoun is most likely referred to Jim. We can say that him substitutes for Jim. So we can say that number 9 can also be rendered as number 8. Jim walked into the room and everybody stared at Jim. Although 9 is perfectly intelligible, it is stylistically clumsy because the name Jim is used twice. So to avoid this repetition, we use the pronoun him. Pronouns derive their referential content from nouns. In 8, Jim is a referring expression. We have to connect Jim with him in order to interpret the sentence, but the situation can be more complicated. For example, let's look at number 10. The exhibition was a success. It ran for 6 months. Which expression does the pronoun it refer to in 10? If your answer is exhibition, then you are wrong, because it refers to the exhibition, a determinative noun sequence. Such determinative noun sequences are called noun phrases, NP. Let's look at some noun phrases. These are NPs. The hats, the blue hats on a shelf. The central element in a phrase is called head. Heads function as the central elements of phrases. NPs can become very long if you keep adding elements. Let's look at 12. Here, we have an NP with an adorned nominal head. Hats have always been fashionable. So you might wonder why hats are NP. It is because the slot where hats occur can be filled with other NPs. We can substitute any of the NPs in 11 for hats in 12. Number 13 shows 2 possibilities of expanding NPs. These hats have always been fashionable. Hats that you buy at Harrods had always been fashionable. Both sentences have more information, so we can expand hats in 12 into a large string of words that are NPs.
And now I will summarize this long presentation. In section 2.5, we learned about adjuncts, that means sentence elements that give extra information such as how, when, where, or why something happens. For example, suddenly in London or because he can't understand it. Adjuncts are optional and provide additional details rather than essential meaning. They can appear in different positions in a sentence like greedily Andy ate all the biscuits or Andy ate all the biscuits greatly. But they can go between the verb and its objects. Sometimes more than one adjunct can appear in a single sentence. In chapter 3, the focus shifts to words, word classes, and phrases. Although identifying words seems simple, defining what a word is can be tricky. For example, eat and eats are different word forms of the same lexeme. Linguists classify words into word classes such as nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, determiners, and interjections. A noun usually refers to a person, thing, or place, but also includes abstract concepts like happiness. Nouns can often be recognized by their ending like ness or ship, or by the words that appear with them, such as determiners that the, this, some, and adjectives recognize. Determinatives specify meaning, words like a, the, each, some, or many. Some of these can also act as pronouns. Nouns are divided into categories such as common nouns, proper nouns, and pronouns, which replace whole noun phrases. Finally, the chapter introduced the noun phrase, a group of words built around a noun called the head. Examples include the hats, the blue hats, and the blue hats on the shelf. Even a single noun like hats can function as a full noun phrase depending on its position in a sentence. And this is the end of this presentation, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. 고생했어요.